We are watching Meg's breaststroke above the water. Commentary by Coach Chris. So first thing we're going to do is we're going to watch Meg swimming full speed just to kind of see your rhythm and tempo. Now this is your race quality stroke, which is really good. I like a lot of the stuff you're doing with your breaststroke, Meg. One of the things I'd like to see is a little more of this in practice, especially when we're doing our sprint sets. Try to get that same body position and head drive and hip drive that I'm seeing here. Let's go ahead and move back, and we're going to talk about some of the stuff that I really like, that you're doing really well. And there's a few things we can also work on improving, and we'll talk about a few more things when we look underwater. The thing with the breaststroke videos is, above water, most of the kids are doing really, really well. Meg's doing an excellent job with a lot of the stuff we're looking for above water. So there's probably going to be more things to look at that we can see more clearly underwater. So that video is probably going to be a little bit heavier than this above water one. But we'll talk about what we see above water real quick and then move to that underwater one, because that's where a lot of the details can be more clearly seen. All right, let's get Meg swimming. So here it looks like she's doing a really, really good job of pressing and getting that head low on this stroke. That's what we want to see. And one of the things I really look for is the height and the shrug, because we want to be swimming really tall in the water, especially for breaststroke. And Meg's doing an excellent job here. You can see she's getting her almost entire arm out. And we'll see underwater if she maintains this. But I like the kids to get their elbows as close to the surface as possible, and get as much of the upper arm out as possible to establish a really nice high position. She does a really good job in this of getting her shoulders shrugged and forwards. So her momentum's coming up, but you can see she's shrugging forward, so she's carrying her weight forward. Okay, that's critical, because you see breaststrokers, or usually non-breaststrokers, who try to get up tall in the water like Meg's doing, and they tend to stay vertical. They never really lean forward and get the shoulders shrugged, so you really don't see that momentum carry forward. But she's doing a really good job of transferring that momentum forward. This shrug looks really, really good. One thing I will say, I do not like the praying position for the hands. And what I mean by that is, I prefer the arms and the elbow stay in. This is the upper arm. Arm and elbow. I'd like the arm and elbow to stay in a straight line just below the water surface. Like wrist, hand, elbow, forearm, all straight line, like a pair of skis she's resting on top of the water. What I see she's doing, if you can look at her hands, she's bringing her hands up higher than her elbows and up towards her face. So that's why I call this the praying position, because it looks like she's saying a prayer. Yeah, I don't like that because it's extra motion that we don't need. And when the hands are coming up like that, they're not starting to extend forward, so it's kind of delaying that recovery of her stroke, and it's slowing down those hands. So I don't really like the hands coming up out of the water. You can get them to the surface, you can get them halfway out, you can get them a little way out, but my rule of thumb is the hands need to stay at the level of the elbows. If you watch a lot of really, really top level breaststrokers, the modern breaststrokers are moving more toward that. You still see a lot that do this praying position, but I just think it's extra motion, so I try to teach the kids to avoid that. So try to keep the hands in line with the elbow. Go ahead and keep them underwater. We don't need to swing them up and over. So here you can see she's extending, and she's still up high in the water. I really like that. There's a press. Now in this one, her head's up, and we'll talk about that on the underwater video. That head position is key. Really, really, really nice height. You can see the energy on the shoulder shrug. That looks really, really good. Again, you just see the hands on this. The thing I don't like is they come up and then they got to go down, so then it's going to start her momentum down instead of forward. That's why I tend to prefer that straight linear position with the hands and elbows, so that you're just pushing everything forward instead of that arcing up and over and down and in motion, because your body's going to follow the hands, and then you're going to start dolphin diving a little bit, and I bet we'll see a little bit of that when we go underwater. Now, one thing I really like is the weight transfer. You'll see her come up. You come up really nice, Meg. But watch the weight transfer back to her hips as she drives the kick. You see that? And her hips come up nice and high because she's getting that head low. But there's a real good back and forth. She brings the weight up with her shrug, and then she pushes it back into the feet, and that's loading more power into her kick. So she's getting a lot more out of her kick for her body size than even bigger athletes are probably getting. So probably the best thing I see out of her stroke is the hips, is the follow through on the kick. She does a really, really good job of that. And that's hard to teach. But we've been working really hard on the height and the timing of the kick with a lot of our drills. So she's doing an excellent job on that and adapting that to her stroke. This is one thing we talk about a lot, and I've talked to her at meets and at practice. We'll talk to her. You know, here she's going into her open turn. Actually, her open turn approach wasn't bad, but she's kind of, you look how close. She lets her arms collapse, and she gets in real close to the wall. And then her eyes are going over here. You know, she has a tendency to look around in her races. So, Meg, try to keep your eyes forward. When you're landing on the wall, keep the eyes down at the bottom, and then try and instead of looking to the side, try and keep your eyes towards the wall, forward, towards the timers. Get the eyes in a neutral position and try and keep more space between you and the wall. Once you collapse like this, see how your arms are all bent, real tight against the wall. That's why you're coming up out of the water for that turn, because you're just running out of room to get the feet to the wall. Good foot placement on the wall. Solid glide. This is something we've been working on a lot with the entire group, and that's a really good example of a solid glide. And for her height, she's getting out there. The first glide, she just took her first dolphin kick. She's already at the flags. It's crucial to a good breaststroke. You have to have those good underwater pullouts. And people always think about the technique of them, which she's doing a good job of, but it's really the gliding and streamlining in the different positions that separate the good breaststroke pullouts and breaststrokers from the ones that aren't as good. And this is a pretty good job. Lifting the head a little early, but we'll talk about that when we see underwater because it's a lot clearer. And you see what that causes with that early head up. She's going to come up this way a little bit. Grab that pen. She's going to come up this way. And instead of the forward stroke that we've been seeing, now she's going to go really, really pronounced. It's going to be really, really pronounced in a downward angle. So that's a little bit more about the breakout and how she's lifting the head early underwater. We'll talk about that on the underwater video. But I wanted to point out what that's causing. It's causing that first stroke to be more up and down than forward. And we want that first stroke to establish that forward momentum right off the bat. So really solid stroke. I like what I'm seeing, getting nice and high in the water. The weight transfer from that shoulder shrug and chest all the way back to the hips looks great. Overemphasizing scooping the hands up. I don't really like that prayer position on recovery. Try to keep things more in line. But overall, above water's looking very, very solid. So let's move underwater and take a look at some of the more finer details.